Second. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm Dr. Rabia Akhtar. I'm Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences at University of Lahore. I'm also Director, Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Research. There are moments in life of a nation when history does not announce itself gently. It arrives with pressure, uncertainty, accusation, danger, and the burden of decision. And May 2025 was one such moment for Pakistan. It was a moment when Pakistan was tested not only in the battlefield of military preparedness, but also in the battlefield of perception, restraint, credibility, and national resolve. It was a moment when the world watched closely, when narratives were manufactured, when allegations were amplified, and when escalation was not an abstract possibility, but a real and dangerous prospect. Yet Pakistan did not panic. Pakistan did not overreach. Pakistan did not allow itself to be trapped by India's coercive signaling or by the fog of disinformation. Instead, Pakistan responded with discipline, clarity, and confidence. It demonstrated that deterrence is not merely about possessing capability. Deterrence is about knowing when to act, how to signal, how to control escalation, and how to preserve political and diplomatic space under extreme pressure. Today's discussion begins from a central proposition. May 2025 was not only a military or deterrence moment for Pakistan, it was also a diplomatic turning point. Pakistan's performance in that crisis created a new baseline. It punctured assumptions about India's unilateral escalation dominance. It challenged that narrative that Pakistan can be isolated or strategically cornered. And it showed that Pakistan is not merely a state to be managed during crisis, but a state capable of managing crises with maturity, restraint, and strategic purpose. The question before us today is not simply what happened in May 2025, but the deeper question is what did May 2025 make possible for Pakistan? This webinar brings together some of Pakistan's most experienced diplomats, strategic thinkers, and security experts, the strategic elite of Pakistan, to reflect on these questions. We will revisit May 2025 not as an isolated crisis, but as a turning point in Pakistan's strategic imagination, from deterrence to diplomacy, from crisis to response, to geopolitical relevance, and from being spoken about to being heard as a serious actor in regional and global affairs. I'm deeply grateful to all my panelists today, and I welcome Ambassador Aizaz Chaudhry, who's former Foreign Secretary and has been ambassador to Netherlands and the United States, Dr. Adil Sultan, Dean Faculty of Aerospace and Strategic Studies, Air University, Islamabad, Professor Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, Vice Chancellor and Meritorious Professor, Quaid-e-Azam University, Air Commodore Khalid Banuri, Senior Advisor, Project Phoenix, Pakistan Air Force, Dr. Maria Sultan, Director General, South Asian Strategic Stability Institute, Dr. Salma Malik, Associate Professor, Department of Defense and Strategic Studies at Quaid-e-Azam University, and Syed Zia Jaffrey, Deputy Director, Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Research at University of Lahore. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We will begin this conversation with all our panelists, and I would appreciate if you could keep your comments to 8 to 10 minutes and give us your opening remarks. So we'll start with Ambassador Aizaz Chaudhry. And sir, we will do a reverse. We will start with Pakistan's moment today and trace it back to May 2025. So as you know, Pakistan is not being discussed merely as a crisis actor, but as a state with potential diplomatic utility in wider regional mediation. So how do you read this shift in Pakistan's international positioning, especially in the context of its role and reputation after May 2025? With this, I give the floor to you, Ambassador Aizaz.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rabia Akhtar. I must also start by commending you in particular for carrying forward the narrative of Pakistan far and wide, together with University of Lahore. I would, in response to your question, like you to imagine yourself as a Pakistani back, say, end of 2024. And the impression that, or the perception was that Pakistan is a divisive polity a weak economic state which does not have a writ of the state. And from that 1.5 years later, today Pakistan stands as a confident nation that can carry itself and also work for peace within and peace without. What has changed? I think what has changed is May 2025 events, which indicated three things that have been of fundamental value for this very change. One, Pakistan established that it can defend itself, that even asymmetrically disadvantaged powers can, by virtue of modern technologies, stand up to blatant aggression and emerge as a sort of victor. So I think that was one big step forward which the entire world noticed. The second was a remarkable achievement that Pakistan had for good 2.5 decades. India had weaved a narrative against Pakistan that it was an epicenter of terrorism. They had benefited from the international environment created after 9/11 events to project Pakistan as a country that sponsors terrorism, sort of radical Islam terrorism. I think that was busted by the Pahalgam incident, when India, in pattern with the past events, would always was able to sort of raise the same allegations that it had done in the past, but no one in the world believed that. While everyone, including Pakistan, condemned the incident, there was not a single country which endorsed or echoed the allegations of India against Pakistan. So I think that was a remarkable step forward, because there was another incident later in the Indian occupied Kashmir, but India hesitated to blame Pakistan because its lie by this time had been busted. And the third major factor was the kind of bravado that we saw from Indian media, accentuated by the provocative statements that Indian leaders were making. I think that projected the image of India as a country which is which is not at peace with itself, that it is jingoistic with its neighbors, that it was not capable of acting as a net security provider, so-called. So in contrast, Pakistan's, I think, media was restrained. Pakistan's, I would say Pakistani political leadership, Pakistan's thought leaders were also quite restrained, and they behaved themselves as a responsible country. So ever since, I think this was, and I agree with you, it was a turning point because you saw then Pakistan started going places after that, and India made a series of policy errors. I think the first policy error that India incurred was not acknowledging the role that the US president has played, whereas India itself had requested the US president to help attain a ceasefire. Now, Indian argument was that it was done through the DGMOs of the two countries. Then the question arises, why is it that the president of the United States was the first one to announce it, followed by endorsement by Pakistan, and then by Indian Foreign Secretary? So clearly, India, made a policy error right there, and ever since, as you have seen, diplomatic space has been opening for Pakistan and closing for India. The other policy error that India has been making ever since is mixed signaling to China, to Russia, to United States, to, sort of in the name of strategic autonomy. Sometimes they behave as a member of BRICS, as a leader of Global South. The other time, they behave very, very differently. So I think their stature has gone down. Whereas in case of Pakistan, we joined, for instance, the Board of Peace, so that we can help bring an end to the war in Gaza, which I believe was a genocidal war, whereas the Indian Prime Minister actually made a visit to Israel in the hope that it would woo President Trump. And while he was there, he did not utter a single word about the genocide that Israel had committed against the people of Palestine and Gaza. So I think those were kind of policy errors that were accumulating on the part of Indians, whereas on the part of Pakistanis, there was very clear line that Pakistan was now emerging as a kind of stability provider for the region. And then came the US-Iran war, and 3 days before the war, Mr. Modi had visited Israel and struck all the wrong notes. Whereas in case of Pakistan, we took a position, a principled position, that aggression by anyone against other is condemnable. But Pakistan offered its good offices for peacemaking right from the start. And, lo and behold, everybody became convinced that Pakistan is the one that will be able to facilitate not only the ceasefire, but hopefully for a peace settlement soon. Whereas in case of India, I don't know, out of jealousy or out of perpetual or compulsive hostility, they said that Pakistan was actually committing a dalali, a kind of middleman with negative connotations. And I think the whole world saw this in very bad taste, because peacemaking is one of the noblest forms of diplomacy. So we have seen Pakistan come of age in this 1.5 year, and I'm very, very happy and proud as a Pakistani. What next? I think there are two areas in which I believe I should comment. One is that will Operation Sindoor resume, because it is on pause? I personally believe that it will not resume in the short term, because one, Indian armed forces will need to plug the gaps that they had suffered from, and secondly, the international environment is no longer conducive for India to sell the same kind of mantra of Pakistan or associating Pakistan with terrorism. I think they will wait. My own sense is that in some ways the Operation Sindoor has taken a different shape of terrorism through proxies in Pakistan, through proxies like BLA and TTP via Afghanistan. So some would contend that Operation Sindoor is continuing, but its form has changed. Likewise, by blocking the or suspending the Indus Waters Treaty, again, India is now continuing the Operation Sindoor in a slightly different form by threatening the lives and livelihoods of the Pakistanis, millions of Pakistanis. But I would also add that when the next cycle of union elections come in, and we have seen that in the past practice has been that those elections were used by Mr. Modi as to voice his anti-Pakistan, anti-Muslim mantra, so that he can fetch more votes. So I would sense that closer to the election, say in about 2 to 3 years, we should expect India to undertake another kinetic aggression, and therefore we should remain prepared. My second point would be that after the war in West Asia is over, there would be some kind of new security architecture that will be formed there. And Pakistan has already placed itself or positioned itself very well by participating in the initial discussions. When the meeting, the first step meeting was held here in Islamabad, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan. I think the seeds for that new architecture were sown, and right after that, our foreign minister dashed to China to take them into confidence. So it is my sense that the new security architecture will see Pakistan also play a role. What would be the contours of that security architecture is another debate, another question I'll not like to mention here. But I also would like to end my 7-8 minute intervention by saying that in order for Pakistan to play a more meaningful role in that new security arrangement in West Asia, or whether we want to counter India, or whether we want to really leverage our diplomatic and military profile for something good, then it should be in the field of economic security and human resource development. I think that's where all of you you belong to universities, and you're all thought leaders, and I'm very privileged to be addressing the key thought leaders of Pakistan. So I think we all come in, and the government in particular need to really focus on securing Pakistan's economic future, so that it is at par with the high diplomatic and military profile that our country has attained. So thank you so much for this opportunity to voice my views
Thank you.
in the presence
Thank
of
you.
all
Thank you
these.
so much, Ambassador Chaudhry. And I think you have really, hit all the points about Pakistan. India's long-standing effort to diplomatically isolate Pakistan, having lost traction. And Pakistan having entered important conversations as a consequential regional actor. So thank you so much for your intervention. Since we are talking about the region, I would like to now go to Dr. Salma Malik and talk about the emerging regional security order, Pakistan's place in it, and alliance formations. So Dr. Salma Malik, thank you so much for being here with us. How do you see this reconfiguration of alliance patterns and strategic alignments in South Asia and Middle East and beyond? And how should Pakistan position itself within these emerging formations? And with this, your 8 to 10 minutes intervention starts now. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Rabia, for your kind invitation, for making me part of this enterprise, and for also making me part of the first book that immediately, as intense as Operation Sindoor was, your book also came out very intensely. So that was part of the Zarbe Karar, I would say, given your Air Force background. So when we look at the region, there are several things. I mean, Ambassador Aizaz Sahab has so well framed the entire context that one just need to add few extra lines to it and you're done with that aspect. There are two things which I'll later return to, but I just want to leave it with the audience, and that is the aspect of SARC Plus that we have been talking about. In fact, Pakistan has also always been very inclusive when it comes to regional configurations. But given that India has been a major spoiler, so Pakistan has also proposed the aspect of, Pakistan is part of the larger countries who have proposed the aspect of SARC Plus without the inclusion of India, by the way. But we do say that if it doesn't work, then we have to look at some regional configuration that makes the South Asian countries come together on a common platform. And the second is this recent development by the World Bank, where on the economic frontiers, given Pakistan's deep engagement with the MENA region, we have been sort of tagged into the larger MENA. But more about that later. But when we look at the developments that took place in this one last year, let me just start with a simple observation. I mean, when we look at the last 12 months and we audit it, Pakistan was actually being described by the international press, and most of that international press was actually influenced and led by India's disinformation campaign as a pariah state. And it was a very, very well orchestrated campaign, not driven over 2-3 years, but over decades, where dead people were suddenly brought alive and they were writing ghost articles, making all type of scenario buildings for Pakistan. But the fact was that the only news about Pakistan was in the negatives. It was an economically fragile country. It was politically turbulent. Terrorism, as Ambassador Aizaz has talked about, was used as a strong trump card against Pakistan. And it was also in a strategic, marginalized or isolated position. However, when we look at Pakistan's position today, not only are senior delegations from Washington, Tehran, and other countries flying into Islamabad for direct conversations and dialogue, Pakistan's mediatory efforts have been genuinely appreciated the world over. And we have gained a lot of support as a result of that, and which is not a coincidence at all. This is the result primarily of a strategic transformation whose origins actually rest in these 4 days of last May. So the transformation that we see today, despite the fact that this conflict was short and intense and profoundly unsettling for the existing regional order. And when we talk about the international order or the regional order, what we have seen is that there are massive transformations and shifts in how we have been looking at the world traditionally. Yet the fact is that South Asia still remains marred very heavily in traditional security parameters. But what India did over last couple of years, starting with the Balakot strikes and then the misfire of BrahMos, and then the launch of Operation Sindoor, was trying to re-evaluate and transform the regional order in its own favor. And the type of escalation that India had surprisingly sprung on us, or planning to spring on us, given that Pakistan's conventional might was numerically inferior, was absolutely checkmated. So these shifts have been defined by three structural aspects. First, the rules of engagement in South Asia have been permanently rewritten. Both sides demonstrated a willingness to strike beyond the line of control into military and civilian infrastructure in each other's heartlands, India more so. In fact, India totally disregarded the rules of engagement, and in the pretext of striking terrorist hideouts, they actually targeted innocent civilians. And there was, in the initial few hours, no one who was listening to Pakistan. And then when Pakistan tipped the balance, the entire narrative changed. So this was important. Many people would say, even today, that why did Pakistan react the way it did? We should have been more complacent. Had we been more complacent, we would have been mentioned in the past tense, not in the present. So Pakistan really had to respond. And inshallah, whenever the future, if there is, God forbid, any such situation, the response would be far more intense and far more precise than anything. However, Pakistan's reaction, as I just said, was very precise. India's claim that it would no longer tolerate nuclear blackmail, and Pakistan's demonstration that not only does it retain effective deterrence from a position of conventional asymmetry, but it also managed to not use the N-word and maintain a high level of conventional deterrence, which was very, very beautifully put forward by the tri-services effort. And this was something that India was not actually looking for. So we checkmated India in a massive fashion. And if you recall the article that I contributed for your book, Strategic Reckoning, we were talking about how the region was very, very tense about an upcoming nuclear exchange and how would Pakistan respond. And the knee-jerk reaction and response by everyone was that Pakistan would be using the nuclear assets because there's a massive conventional asymmetry. However, Pakistan never did that. And this is something that India was not looking forward to. They thought that Pakistan is going to tip the threshold and it will go further. And these two aspects, where we did not yield into India's nuclear blackmail and effectively used our conventional deterrence, has put an entirely new threshold that is a very classic case study in its own right. Chatham House assessments do say that both the countries have moved up the escalation ladder, but it remains open to interpretation. Secondly, the architecture of great power competition in the region has also shifted. The US, which began the crisis by declaring that it's none of our business, ended up brokering a ceasefire, and very proudly, they just wanted to claim that we have done the moment. However, we also need to really iterate and reiterate this notion that the ceasefire that the US brokered between the two countries was primarily, the brokering was a face saving for India, and the terms of the ceasefire were entirely charted by Pakistan. And this was actually very fascinating as to how a country which tried to preempt, tried to provoke, ended up really humbling itself. And then we also see that the same US, which said that it's none of our business, was actually found itself in need of Pakistan's diplomatic services and diplomatic acumen barely 11 months later. China, the military hardware that Pakistan has built in collaboration with China, also found simultaneously its platforms performance, what all they could do, how all Pakistan has actually not only mated the man and the machine, but how Pakistan has accelerated its diversification and did not remain exclusively dependent on what Beijing was offering. For India, meanwhile, it saw its global aspirations complicated by regional instability, straining its position in the Indo-Pacific framework, where India had for the longest pitched itself as the net security provider. And here everyone had a massive question mark to India's acumen about whether they could really perform even at the home front or not. In a recent conference regarding Asia Pacific, as we call it, or Indo-Asia Pacific, where there were intense conversations about how the US may require, or the US may be edging out of the Asia Pacific, and China is coming in as a stabilizing factor. Towards the conclusion, everyone was shocked to analyze that not even once India was mentioned as a country that could actually gear itself up or become responsible enough to be the next big regional actor. N number of possibilities were being talked about, despite the Indians being there. Even they would not talk about India's acumen to lead the region. That is how much India, by its misadventure, has compromised its position and its stature. Thirdly, and most consequentially, the Middle East's own security implosion has expanded Pakistan's strategic threat, strategic domain, as well as parameters. The Israeli strikes on Iran, the 12-day war, the ongoing Iranian conflict, Iranian attacks, and overall the attacks on the energy infrastructure of the Gulf, all of this has fundamentally destabilized the security guarantees that Gulf states previously relied upon. And again, the US, as a security provider for those countries, that has also become very questionable. And into that vacuum, Pakistan stepped in, not only through its diplomatic acumen, but also as a very stabilizing, quiet, potent military power. And it has also actually been invited to step in by these countries, which was totally unimaginable 2 years back. The second question that you asked about a genuine reconfiguration of alliance partnerships, the answer, of course, is yes, though it is better described as a reconfiguration than a revolution, and it carries both opportunities and risks. The SMDA, Pakistan Saudi Strategic Military Defense Agreement of September 25, is a binding collective defense framework that commits each party to threat aggression. So far, I mean, if we look at Pakistan's performance, even prior to the the aggression upon Iran by Israel and America combined, and all the weak moments that Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, and Iran have it with each other, Pakistan has performed again very intelligently, very prudently, and it has actually provided a lot of stability to this factor. And even during this hot phase of the conflict that we had seen in the past, prior to the ceasefire as well. And this is not merely a formalization of old ties, it is an institutionalization of a new strategic logic. Especially with regards to SMDA, Pakistan has to be very cautious Yet the fact is that Pakistan's military experience, its acumen, the nuclear deterrence, its geographic reach, both as a pivot as well as a zipper state, this provides the other countries, primarily Riyadh, with a lot of military resilience in the post-Iranian deal time frame. And it also anchors Pakistan within the Gulf security architecture in a way that transforms it from a transactional partner into a structural strategic ally. And this is something very important. And Pakistan has to work further on it, where all these opportunities are very fancy. They're wonderful to talk about. Yet Pakistan does have challenges that it has to overcome to 100% capitalize on these moments. Around this bilateral core, there's also a broader formation that is crystallizing, and that are the quadrilateral coordination framework that we saw happening prior to the ceasefire as well. The Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Pakistan's coordination, and which actually brings out something very distinct. Turkey, a NATO membership, a NATO membership and a formidable defense industrial base. Saudi Arabia, the world's second largest oil reserves, and the Gulf political weight. Egypt, which brings Levant into the picture, control of the Suez Canal, and Pakistan's nuclear deterrence and operational military depth. So is this a signaling towards a very different configuration and a big powerhouse emerging? That is a fascinating study to see. And together, these the new quad represents a very nuanced political and military significance for the Muslim majority countries in the world, and combines population of 500 million. This framework, although does remain informal, non-doctrinal, and importantly, deliberately ambiguous about its nuclear dimension and relationship to formal alliance commitments, but this ambiguity, as strategic theorists have long argued, is not necessarily a flaw. It can be a deterrent asset, so Pakistan needs to leverage that. In all these networks and these frameworks, Pakistan is not positioning itself as a junior partner, as we usually would. Pakistan is now very confidently standing as a pivotal actor in a pivotal state. Something many political pundits had always talked about, that Pakistan's potential as a pivot and a zipper state is very important. And this pivotal state status would be talked more in context of Central Asia and South Asia and the Gulf nexus. But now we are actually going beyond that. We are talking about the larger the Levant, the Gulf, and all of these aspects. And what we need to actually see is that this can be superimposed by the CPEC BRI route, which provides Pakistan with that economic outreach. And that is also very critical when you look at a very comprehensive picture. Furthermore, there are, and I'm just coming to towards my end. Pakistan has in these 12 months faced several challenges, some internal, mainly internal. We also have governance problems. We also have a very serious terrorism issue. And as Ambassador Aizaz Chaudhry was mentioning, that the Operation Sindoor at an alternate level continues beyond that kinetic phase. In fact, the hybrid phase of Operation Sindoor started before 6th May, as soon as the Pahalgam incident was staged. The hype in terrorism all across KP as well as Balochistan, which continues to date, hasn't really gone down. And where we remain very alive to that, we don't realize that both of these angles are deeply linked to each other. These are the challenges Pakistan has. Pakistan has square governance challenges. We have economic challenges. The Iranian war has also brought us massive energy shortfalls and crises, which we are trying to handle very well. But Pakistan also has used hedging diplomacy very well to come across as a stabilizing and important actor. I can go on, but let me close
Thank you.
this thing by saying that the regional security order that existed before May 7th or this May 2025 war is not returning. A new architecture is forming, a multipolar, modular, defined less by formal alliances than by layered partnerships of convenience grounded in shared threat perceptions. Within this architecture, Pakistan has, in a very remarkably compressed period of time, moved from marginalization to centrality. The question before us and before Pakistani policymakers is whether this moment of strategic relevance will be institutionalized into durable diplomatic capital, or it will dissipate through internal instability, strategic overreach, or the failure to sustain the hedging discipline that has made this moment possible. These are the core challenges that Pakistan faces, and this is precisely what this panel that you have put together is going to address. Thank you so much, Dr. Saiba, for your time and patience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salma. We absolutely do not doubt your stamina. But thank you so much for giving us such a comprehensive, overview. Pakistan obviously historically has been viewed through a very narrow security lens. And I think, like you rightly said, and also earlier Ambassador Aizaz, that post-May 2025 environment allows Pakistan to redefine itself as a stabilizing actor rather than as a mere crisis participant that earlier, it had a reputation for. With this, I would move towards the strategic dimensions, and I would like to call in Dr. Adil Sultan for his intervention to speak to us about strategic stability and the evolving India-Pakistan strategic relationship. How do you see, Dr. Adil Sultan, the India-Pakistan strategic relationship taking shape, especially after May 2025? And what does this mean for the broader strategic stability in South Asia, the term that we are so fond of using? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rabia, and Assalamu alaikum. Good morning to all the participants who have joined on the weekend. And it's only Dr. Rabia who can pull this kind of people on a Saturday morning. Much appreciated. And I'm also humble by joining this esteemed panel of experts, some of my senior colleagues and friends. It is also challenging to say things which this panel doesn't know. But I would start from this while we commemorate May 2025 conflict. It's also a moment of reflection that we need to go beyond narratives or rhetorics and to carry out a serious appraisal of the May 2025 conflict. The conflict itself, it established or it addressed, it removes some of the misperceptions, like there was a misperception that Pakistan probably cannot respond conventionally against India. I think that has been adequately addressed. It was addressed in 2019, but comprehensively in 2025. But there's also some new misperceptions it has given birth to, especially on the other side, that possibly there is an expanded space for conventional conflict between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, India and Pakistan. So I think we need to carry out an appraisal. So coming to your basic questions, and I'll try to remain focused and within time. Once we talk about strategic stability in South Asia, we generally refer to or we draw lessons from the Cold War model, where strategic stability in traditional sense, just to give a brief explanation because some of the participants might be students. So generally strategic stability is taken as a capability that you have that can deny the other side the incentive to launch a nuclear strike against you. So that was the general definition of the construct that we borrowed from the Cold War. And the Cold War was between the two major nuclear powers, symmetric powers. But in India and Pakistan, we have always dealt with the asymmetric equation where India had conventional superiority and Pakistan was conventionally disadvantaged. So not necessarily all the constructs that were applicable in the Cold War model or between two major powers are applicable in South Asia. Again, there is another question also, in the era of emerging and disruptive technologies, can strategic stability ever be achieved? We are not talking about nuclear preemptive strikes or things like that, but there is a possibility that these conflicts between India and Pakistan, these skirmishes or conflict, they are going to be the new reality, and we may have to deal with these things. The second is about the post-May conflict in India-Pakistan relations. What is the impact of strategic stability? What was the impact on strategic stability after this May 2025 conflict? I think both countries seem to have drawn different lessons. As I said earlier, that Pakistan may have reasserted its position as a credible conventional and nuclear power because we were able to respond effectively against India's conventional aggression. On the other hand, India may have learned a lesson that they have an expanded space and Pakistan may not retaliate with nuclear weapons, and there was since no nuclear signaling. They think that they can get away with in the future as well for conventional conflicts. Now that is destabilizing. Our traditional posture has been that we will respond conventionally, but if the conventional capability is not adequate enough to repel India's aggressive designs, we may possibly resort to the use of nuclear weapons. But now, if we are giving that signal that we have the conventional capability, this, in a way, opens space for India to think about future such adventures. Something that we announced in the post-May 2025 conflict, the establishment of Pakistan Army Rocket Force Command. I think that is also interesting and we need to evaluate because it's still in the formative phase. Not much is known about this Rocket Force Command, but the logic that was given by the decision makers of some of the statements that came up, that we need to build our conventional responses, we need to have capabilities that can inflict sufficient punishment upon India through conventional means. Now, it also, in a way, may contradict with our earlier stance that we have some thresholds, and those thresholds can come possibly earlier. And because of those ambiguities or uncertainties, when we may resort to the use of nuclear weapon, India was deterred by launching its conventional military limited warfighting doctrines against Pakistan. Now, if the Indian military planners, they would have this comfort that if they launch conventional military strike against Pakistan, Pakistan would respond conventionally. That may have open space for conflict in South Asia. And that's what the Indian planners are saying. From our side, we are not giving that kind of a comfort, but by developing that posture, by integrating those capabilities, having those capabilities might lead to that kind of a misperception on the other side. Then the war of narratives that we saw, how it can impact strategic stability in South Asia. Yes, we are emotional people, both India and Pakistan. We tend to believe in what we are saying, but sometimes these narratives could be self-deceptive or misleading as well. It can give you a false sense of confidence that even though we are a nuclear weapon state, we can engage in a military conflict with the other side, on both sides, India and Pakistan as well. Now that could be destabilizing because in future it would put pressure on the leadership. If there is an incident or there is some aggressive posturing on the other side to respond at the same point. Earlier it had been different. We had been telling that there's no space for any conflict and hence we need to talk to each other. But now as we get fixated in these narratives, some of which are to, in a way, infuse the notion of that nationalism, and all states do that. But amongst India and Pakistan, where there is so much of distrust and pressure on the leadership to act, these narratives could be destabilizing in the long run. Now, what is required to maintain strategic stability? I think first is the realistic assessment of the conflict beyond narratives. We had demonstrated that we have some advantages, but if there were some gaps, like in terms of air defense and how to counter the supersonic, hypersonic missiles, I think those capabilities need to plugged in. And then one common lesson that probably we all learned, that the air power is going to be most important factor in any future conflict, either in India and Pakistan or anywhere in the other parts of the world. At the Gulf conflict, we also saw how air power has played a pivotal role. And once we talk about air power, it's not only in the manned aircraft, the drones, the employment concept, the whole the kill system that we are talking about. So if we have drawn correct lessons, our investment should go at the right direction to build those capabilities, to plug those gaps. So that is where we should be focusing on. And the final is, I think the question that you raised, Dr. Abhay, has made 2025 restore deterrence equilibrium between India and Pakistan. Yes, we may conclude this, yes, it may have restored deterrence equilibrium, because the other side now knows with clarity that there is going to be a response from Pakistani side, irrespective of what tools or the weapon system they employ against Pakistan. And as I said earlier, some of the people said that how could India launch surgical strikes against Pakistan in a nuclear environment? That's another debate of stability instability paradox, how it can shape our decision makers. But the conclusion is that we have been able to re-establish the credibility of conventional as well as nuclear deterrence. Because sometimes it is misleading that nuclear weapons can assure that there wouldn't be any kind of a conflict between nuclear armed states. So we need to be very clear that nuclear weapons are not a panacea for every kind of a crisis. These lose credibility if you start flaunting your nuclear capability against any kind of aggression, limited or a surgical strike. So you need to build conventional capabilities, and this conflict has established that we have a credible conventional and nuclear capability. The second, I think, important factor is the role of third party. Yes, in this crisis, third party did play some prominent role, but we cannot take it guaranteed that this third party will continue to play that role in future crises as well. So whatever we have to do in that context, we need to. Third is the temptation to engage in a military conflict. That we need to resist on both sides. We are, in the end, nuclear weapon states. There could be miscalculations, there could be pressures that could lead to unwanted consequences. Fourth is the rhetoric. Yes, it's good sometimes to build that nationalism amongst the public, to motivate, because it gives a sense of pride, but we need to move beyond these rhetorics once we are talking about strategic stability between India and Pakistan. And so I would end. I've already taken 11 minutes. I had a stopwatch. Thank you, Dr. Abhay, for giving me opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adil Sultan. On a normal day, I would definitely, find something to be on, two sides of the debate with you. But today I really struggled. I agree with almost everything you have said today. So thank you so much for your excellent comments on strategic stability and as to how the region is looking now and also the future outlook. With this, I would like to move to Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. First of all, greetings and congratulations on assuming Vice Chancellorship of Quaid-e-Azam University. It is very dear to our heart. This university, almost, I think everybody here is associated. I'm a Qaidian myself. So thank you so much for your leadership, and you have our full support in all reforms that you're going to bring to QAU. With this, I would like to ask you to share with our audience a bit about the nuclear conventional balance, the Indian performance, and the diplomatic humiliation that it had suffered. You also wrote an excellent chapter for our book, Strategic Reckoning, the link of which Zia Jaffrey has shared in the chat for our participants to freely download. It's a free ebook. So India's performance in May 2025, we have seen was framed domestically as strength, but internationally it struggled with evidence, credibility, and narrative control. So how should we assess this gap in India's strategic claims and its actual performance? And how do you look at the nuclear conventional balance between India and Pakistan? Does it expose the limits in India's assumptions about escalation dominance? Over to you, Dr. Jaspal.
Thank you very much for your kind words and congratulations. And I have always bet I think my strength is the guidance, especially by these close strategic community guidance. And I'm very thankful. Especially speaking after Ambassador Aizaz Saab, then Adil, Salma, it's very difficult. What is left? I think there's nothing. They have already spoken, and I concur. But then secondly, because you have invited me and my dear colleague spoken from QAU 20 minutes, and I have to demonstrate as a Vice Chancellor, I shall speak 30 minutes. So you have to bear this. But anyway, I'm coming back to this point, and I try.
You are taking 10 minutes, right?
No, 30 minutes. Because of my colleague, you have given 20 minutes because of the stature in the university. No, I will be 10 minutes.
You will come to Qaid-e-Azam University for the rest of the 20 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, coming to the things, let me take, this is a very important point, which you do not find in the Western egoistic literature. They are not taking this thing, or maybe in the coming days, we will come across, and by this, you can say statement will be proven wrong. If I think that the future discourse on the warfare or a making of a strategy or a doctrine, that will be grounded on two conflicts. One is, which we have seen this May 2025, it was, or I am referring it as symmetric warfare or symmetric war. And whatever we learned a lesson at that time and in the last 1 year, they will be going to guide the war. And the second is, which is happening, there is a ceasefire. And within these two, Pakistan is important actor. In the first, as a balancer, and in the second, as a mediator, facilitator, and maintaining its diplomat. So in these two conflicts, when we look about Pakistan, Pakistan's stature as a militarily capable state demonstrated on 10th May, and everyone has recognized. And now, since the start of this conflict, 28th February to date, I think that on the diplomatic platform or a chessboard, Pakistan's scales have been reckoned. So that is the two, I think, will be going to happen. Now, coming back to the military domain, my understanding is that these two conflicts, especially India and Pakistan conflict, had changed the entire nuclear discourse, and we started saying that we have entered into a fourth nuclear age. Now, when we look about the fourth nuclear age, it is very entirely different. This is an age in which we can say the character of war has been completely changed. There is no more what you call it, these escalatory ladder analogy. There is an elevator analogy has now come. There are a number of the other characteristics, and because of the short of time, I'm not going to debate those characteristics which construct this or going to construct this new warfare. Now, here is a very important question that India and Pakistan, when there was a third-party mediation, it's a big humiliation for India because they were not accepting. And irony is, this third party which they approached on 10th May 2025, after realizing that they have been militarily exposed, That third party was before the conflict or during in the post Pahalgam, I mean post 2022 April, it was buying their narrative. It was very much in line with their narrative. And I think in this context, not only this, but all the other Western powers led by the US. I can give you a very simple example. During these days, there was a statement came by J.D. Vance, Vice President of the US, that Pakistan shall cooperate with India in eliminating the terrorist treachery on its side. So what is this? This was a clear indication in April 2025 that India is a great power. India is a dominating power. India can dictate, and United States as a strategic partner standing there. But on 10th May 2025, things changed. India reached to the, you can say, its power, and then as a result, mediation happened, and there was a ceasefire. But from that day to date, even today, I was seeing the Indian newspapers, or you can say media. I found that Indians have been struggling to construct a narrative. And in this struggle, they lost diplomatic, what we call it, sophistication, which Ambassador Aizaz referred to their foreign minister. He's the highest learner foreign minister, according to knowledge, and the term he's used. So that is the first. Second is, Indian media lost the credibility completely. Today, no one is buying their media. Even within their own discourse, the people who are known as always shouting on Pakistan, they are not criticized. And third is, when they said on 12th May, new normal, then Modi doctrine, which we said, or then follow up on the same day or the follow subsequently, Indian Defense Minister Rajnath was saying that Operation Sindoor has been suspended and second round is awaited. Why not in the 1 year this happened? Now, second point in this question is that there was an attack on the terrorist attack in Delhi, and India did not even finger toward Pakistan. That is also different. Of course, India is using hybrid warfare strategy or all these kind of things, but that is an important point. So my understanding is that in this new domain, or what I can buy from the Rabia's point, new security architecture, which is very much having a fourth nuclear age, symmetric warfare, asymmetric warfare, state-on-state warfare, predatory style of foreign policy. In such a, you can say, complex strategic environment, Pakistan has emerged as a confident military power, as a, you can say, decent and dual diplomatic power, and at the same time, it is struggling. Of course, we have been, when people criticize our economic instability, they forget one element. We have been in a war zone since 1979. Whenever we get a small span that we are moving out of it, again a war comes in the neighborhood. So when on your borders there is a fire is burning, how you have a cooler or stability or something like that. You have to keep in mind the spillover impact of politico-military acts in your neighborhood have very fast on you in every state. So that is the reason that we cannot, whenever we try to stabilize now oil prices because of the others' mistake, were terrorism because of the Afghans, and we have to struggle with that. And then there is a big, 7 times bigger state which is ready to spoil. So having said this, how we find is that evidences, as I wrote in my paper also, which I contributed, thank you for, you can say, engaging me in that team. Now, in this case, when we look about what has established, first thing as established, which we have been listening, especially after 1971. I think we all are the people who have grown and matured in this 1971 syndrome. And that syndrome was shattered on 2025, or maybe in February, slightly. Trailer was there in 2029 on 27th February, but it was completely transformed in 4 days. That was 8th, 7th, we hours till 10th, May 2025. So what is the outcome? The outcome is that Pakistan is capable, or its conventional posture is mature enough that to deter India convention. It has also exposed the Indian conventional war-fighting capability, despite having an advantage in the financial and numerical and weaponry terms. That is, that it has exposed in a manner that India rushed for nuclear signaling. I can give you an example. In 2019, these weapons are not for Diwali. And in 2025, what he was saying in the post when the ceasefire announced, you can eat bread or otherwise my weapon is there. So even a rhetoric has been losing its significance. So that is I think, a big shift, that on a spectrum of warfare, if you divide it, yes, India is working in the sub-conventional proxies. In the multi-domain, you can say conventional, we have performed and we are confident. And in the multi-domain warfare, what is the most important or catchy thing is that Pakistani armed forces or political military leadership has demonstrated synergy at the political level. When the war happened, there was a synergy between the people, between the government and the armed forces. Synergy at the armed forces level. If you divide the warfare, this war in a different domain like conventional, I mean Air Force, Navy, Army, cyber, space, media, wherever you would find some kind of a synergy. And in every domain, Pakistan has knocked off India. It means that we are not unaware of these domains. That also reflection of the maturity of the Pakistani makers of a strategy. If you see, they brought the naval, blue water navy aircraft, they brought it, and your show off, they went back. Air Force knocked their Air Force and established Pakistan Air Force superiority on 7th May, early morning, and their entire Air Force was shelled. Then they started TikTok, and then on 27th, mega strikes by the other forces, I mean, especially your ground forces and the LOC and the other, and then they went for the third-party mediation. And in the cyber domain, we know everyone how we were fighting. And in the narrative domain, today they are struggling to construct the narrative, but they are failing. I can buy from my three earlier friends who is isolated today. Just check. In a middle power politics, we have a three great power, and then you have a middle powers. In the middle powers, you can identify anywhere in the world. Today, when you start rating militarily, diplomatically, politically, and having a role in the international domain, you will find Pakistan number one. As a middle power, as an influencer, earlier we were, you can say, linked with the maker of trouble. Now we are linked as a troubleshooter, as a peacemaker. So this is my final take, that conventional post is established. We have a conventional immense solution to tackle India, to defend, deter, and you can say punish India. It has been established. In the 1 year, India failed to cross the limit. Finally, in this context, no more nuclear rhetoric required. We are a responsible nuclear weapon state, and we demonstrated in the last two crises, and we are not isolated. In one last decade, Prime Minister Modi did his best to isolate Pakistan rhetorically, politically, military, whatever domain was available, option was available. In a reverse, he isolated India. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaspal, for sharing your very, thought-provoking insights and exposing, the limits of India's, crisis performance and the rhetoric that they maintain. With this part, we will now move to the future and as to how does it look. And I will move to Dr. Maria Sultan, who's here with us. Thank you so much, Dr. Mari, for being here. I would want you to, share with our audience some insights about how will the next Indo-Pak crisis look like from this new baseline that has been established? What has changed in terms of escalation thresholds, whether risk tolerance has changed or the assumptions on both sides have changed. And also your work has also been, like Dr. Adil Sultan's, on emerging technologies and how do they compress decision-making time in the next crisis. So just give us a futuristic perspective on where do we go from, we are already a year in, how do you see the future, of the next crisis between these two countries? Over to you.
First of all, I would also like to echo, like my colleagues, to show a word of gratitude to Dr. Rabia Akhtar for giving me this opportunity to talk from a forum which is not only very close to my heart, but something which has been, shaping the discourse in this region. So first of all, congratulations, Dr. Rabia, for taking this, in the right direction, in the best direction. It's lovely to have your friends across this morning. And like always, the question which you have posed is not only challenging, but also depends and hinges a lot about in terms of how doctrine is evolving. And as you understand, we do focus a lot on military doctrine at our center and at the institute. So in terms of what we are expecting in the future, there are 4 or 5 assumptions. So I'm just going to walk through for our audience with regards to what we think would be the possible scenario building if there is a future, India-Pakistan standoff. First and foremost, the understanding is that war is no longer an event, it's a process. So this idea that war will cease because you're going to fight, a high intensity war is not something which is now considered as an option. So in the future, what we will be looking at is that you'll be fighting all of this. Second, what is the most pronounced factor, which we have learned from the May conflict and the May war has been that all wars in future will be fought in the pre-war phase. So what does that mean? It means that you will be fighting high intensity, high tempo wars, which will be based on integration of domains, that is space, cyber, EW, and most importantly, a reflective operations with regards to UAVs, with regards to air, with regards to land, and with regards to sea. Although there has been a change in terms of how India's military transformation is underway. And I say this because although Pakistan has done a brilliant job at integration, but India is also moving on the same curve. For now, they are too big, too scattered. But the fact of the matter is that this is the journey on which they have embarked upon. Third most important element out of this element is going to be the element of space. So this means that future warfare is not just going to be an outcome in terms of what happens on these 3 physical domains, the traditional domains of land, air, and sea. But what we are looking at is that future warfare is going to be under the sea, what we are looking at in the Strait of Hormuz. It is going to be space-based because it's going to depend in terms of whether or not you can have secure communication links available to you during warfare. And for that, it means that you will have to have an independent satellite operations. Now, here is the thing. With regards to India, most of their Solaris and Minaris program, as well as a very significant portion of their space command, is actually being funded by the United States. So the real question will be that how far will they be able to militarize it? 1. Number 2, how far will it be able to integrate them if they're not buying American weapons? And what we understand is that they are not buying American weapons. They're buying French weapons. They're buying, British weapons. They're buying different weapons. So it depends that in terms of how technology infusion will evolve and if that is going to be a stable trajectory. From the looks of it, they are embarking on 2 different programs. One is, of course, integrating, high-end platforms, whether it's Rafaels, whether it is EW capacity, or whether it is even space-based assets. But on the other hand, they're also investing a lot in their indigenous capability. Unfortunately, it is led by the Advanis and the Admanis of India. So this basically means that the indigenous gap and integration gap between them to actually actualize all this high-end technology into an effective military capacity on ground is going to be the real gap. So for Pakistan, it's good news. It is good news because, of course, we're at a different level of integration. We're at a different level of execution of operations, and that was visible in the May War. But that said, there's another layer to this architecture. And that layer is something which we will need to foresee for future, because no future war is going to be India-Pakistan only. What we had seen in the May War, which is perhaps not cited in the same realm, is that Pakistan not just defeated India in the May War, we also defeated Israel. We also defeated the French technology. So it was the culmination of the French-Israeli military jointness of operations which was nullified. Now, if it was done by Pakistan and China, that's one element. In future, it's not just Pakistan and China. A very significant portion of Pakistan's military technology is also US-based. So this basically means that our acme of skill is essentially about integration, indigenization, and then actually converting it into a military capability on ground, which can be usable. So future, we are looking at the SDMA. Everybody knows about it. We also are talking about Qatar, Pakistan-Saudi Defense Alliance. We're also talking about Pakistan-Turkey Defense Alliance. So in this case, what you're going to be witnessing is going to be a transformation of not only Western technology, but also Chinese technology. And the integrated theater platforms which we will be building will be very different. So what we are going to look at is going to be an architecture where the Middle Eastern security architecture would also overflow the South Asian security architecture. And last but not least, our excellent relationships right now between Pakistan and Iran is going to be the saving grace. Not because, we have become militarily close to them or strategically close to them or politically close to them or diplomatically close to them, but there is a strategic convergence which has emerged as a result of Pakistan's mediation, as a result of the Pakistan-Iran transit trade, as a result of a new security architecture developing in the Middle East, which would be not based on animosity, but enmity, but on amity. So this means that we will be talking about Saudi-Iran relations, we will be talking about Pakistan-Saudi relations, and of course, this is going to put us into a very delicate situation, for the lack of better words, a delicate situation between UAE, India, US, and also Israel. So how that defense security corridor is going to play out is going to be very real. So future warfare is going to be multi-domain, no doubt. It is going to be based on, technically on the space-based and undersea assets and EW and disruptive technologies. And of course, UAVs, the name of the game these days. But that said, a very strong and a significant portion of that is going to be affected by the economics which is going to come forward. So the economic fault lines is pretty much going to define the future of warfare in this region. Now, in this case, what we're talking about is altogether reorientation with regards to Pakistan, China, reorientation with regards to Belt and Road Initiative, and also, let's not forget, the silent but a very strong player which now connects Pakistan to another region, but from the Pakistan-Iran Transit Trade Agreement, and that is Russia and Moscow and beyond. So this basically means that we will have what you call the great game. The great game is going to be played, but alhamdulillah, as my colleagues have talked before, or ambassador, learned ambassador, my military, analyst friends, Pakistan has played the cards well. So on the geopolitical, geomilitary, geoeconomic map, we will be emerging as a power to be. So that said, it doesn't mean that the other powers which will be offset will allow us to have it easy. So this assessment that it's just going to be an India-Pakistan situation can be a primary base of the pyramid, but there will be other factors, other wars which will be fought against Pakistan as we get complicated into the larger Middle Eastern security architecture, the Central Asia Russian architecture, and last but not least, the South Asian architecture. And above all, underlying all of that is going to be the US-China economic, military cooperation or conflict or containment, whatever you say. Because at the end of the day, it is going to be the shaping of the Belt and Road Initiative and the space which they will manage to craft that is going to either guarantee peace in the region or it's going to be difficult. And in this case, the starting and the end points of the CPAC are going to become extremely important. At this moment, we have seen that most of the conflict which has been thrust on Pakistan in the non-state actor domain has been at the tail end. That has been, in Balochistan, we have seen that in KP, we have seen that in Gawada, we've seen that in Karachi, where most of the terrorist activities have been carried out, and also, of course, in Karachi. A very big element has been shifted from Afghanistan on Pakistan's fault lines with regards to ISIS-K and also with regards to TTP and the confluence which exists between India, Israel, and Afghanistan in terms of putting that reality into the matrix. So in future, we will be looking at also Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir, where they'll try to play the same end, but at a different level, because they think that strategically they might be in a position. But correct me if I'm wrong, most of my military analysts and friends here will correct me, because one of the biggest desires which India had or Indian military has had has been that they can fight a collusive threat between Pakistan and China in the north. And for that, India has to become a mountainous army capable of mountainous warfare. And as we understand, it doesn't matter how good you are to fight a high altitude, high speed, high tempo, mountainous war between Pakistan and India will not result in India's favor. So the trends are there, the ideas are there, but in terms of actualization, we should be prepared for a north-south simultaneous military adventurism. So that said, technology will run the curve, and the military-industrial complex of India will need wars to justify the transitions. And these transitions will be justified in a cyclic manner. So BJP is not wrong, and neither is their government wrong when they say that they are going to go into a cyclic phase of war with us. Not because they need to win these wars, but basically because they want to keep the military-industrial complex of India alive, thriving, and consistently at war with Pakistan. And of course, later on with China, if they have to readdress the political, economic bind which they find themselves in. So with these few words, I'll just leave everybody there, and I hope that it provides some input for some discourse. What the future will hold, nobody knows, because what we have understood is that there are events and then there are events, which not only change history, but also change the discourse fundamentally in terms of paradigm shifts. And what we are witnessing is also the edge and the cusp of a paradigm change. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Al, for this intervention. I thought my question was challenging, but your answer has been more challenging and opening our minds to thinking that this is not only obviously India-Pakistan conflict anymore, but it's also not only about two-front war threat, but multiple front war threat that we need to think about. So thank you so much. And I hope this raises the level of discourse about the future of our region, not only our region, but also all the parties involved. So thank you so much for your intervention. With this, we will now move to Air Commodore Khalid Banuri with the question that everybody has been wanting to ask since May 2025 as to what is the future of air warfare, as to how that is going to shape. And we recently heard the brilliant speech by our air chief, who talked about the centrality of air power, precision, ISR, electronic warfare, and integrated command systems, and as to how Pakistan is right at the cutting edge of technology. So please speak to us about the future of air warfare after May 2025. We are already, like I said, a year in, but especially as the battle space becomes more networked, AI-enabled, sensor-driven, and contested. And I know that Pakistan's success should not produce complacency, something that you always say. What are some of the key operational, technological, doctrinal challenges that Pakistan must prepare for in the next crisis? Over to you.
Thank you very much.
Before Khalid, you go on, I'm going to request Rabia, if you can mute me, I'll be grateful.
I will. I will. Okay.
That's very, very interesting that Maria is asking to get muted. That's very good. Um, Thank you, Rabia. And I think it's not only customary, but it's actually important to thank you for this opportunity, also to kind of make everyone think about these issues. I would have referred to the A Chief's statement, which was a rare thing that happened, and he laid out some of those ideas. And another thing that he mentioned was the full spectrum war. And I know that in this context, it was also the jointness that he was referring to. So the sense of air power and where it goes. Uh, I think a year ago, the skies over South Asia, when they came with the most consequential aerial battle space that the world had witnessed in decades. 4 days, two nuclear states, and an outcome that has since reshaped, in my view, how militaries should think, how staff colleges should work about modern air warfare. There are more questions than there are answers at the moment right now. So I would want to do three things. One, to reflect upon very quickly on what Pakistan got right in May 2025. Then perhaps speculate into where the future of air power must go. And I think it's less of a speculation now because there are some very, very obvious trends that one has to go in there. And then perhaps most importantly, contextualize how we avoid complacency, the possibility of complacency by looking at some of the lessons for the future. And I uh, have a sense of where the Air Force how the Air Force is thinking, but it's only I'll be largely speculating because specifics are not really something that I am not much privy to, but also what I would not want to talk about in very, very specific. But I will be giving some ideas that we might be trying to focus our attention. What Pakistan got right is what worked and why. I think one point to make, and we have talked about this fighter jet and that fighter jet, that missile a lot, which is all true, and we saw some of those brilliant operators being rightly acknowledged and rewarded. I think the defining achievement of 7th May, when the real battle happened, was not the platform, which platform and what machine, but it was the kill chain, the whole networked architecture, fusing ground radars, the AWACS, and the KJ-500s of the world, JTNC, of course, and data links, executing the six-step cycle: find, fix, track, target, engage, and assess the situation. It's going beyond the traditional OODA loop that we talk about. But here's the difference: synchronizing, networking, integrating, but also with the speed that one does not normally expect. Fighter pilots amongst us and in the audience know that moments count and they matter, and this is how all of us were trained. But speed and precision is of a different level now. And then it caught a larger, well-equipped adversary off guard than when we did that. And then when we also talk about the BVR engagements that night, one one invariably talks about the PL-15, how it achieved this. Absolutely true. But here's a thought: the PL-15 missile was the tip of the spear. The spear itself was the kill chain because of this integration. And equally decisive, I should say, is the electronic warfare. Pakistan jammed their communication, degraded radar coverages even before a single missile was fired. Pilots on the other side, I think they received almost no warning because there were no missile lock-ons. traditional thing. So till the last moments that before the impact. And that's not luck. That's doctrine. That was thought through. It was built over years of deliberate investment in the electromagnetic spectrum. It was validated very, very clearly earlier through trainings, through the earlier skirmish that we had, and finally matured by 2025. And then the doctrinal agility also merits that we should an equal recognition. That's where the leadership factor comes in. The air chief himself, when he ordered the shift from the defensive to the counter air offensive counter air function, the decision was given and it was executed within minutes. So when the first Indian weapon crosses our border, all out response came out. The offensive counter air is typically that. So it was done within minute, and it reflects that it doesn't happen without meticulous rehearse and during trainings. Uh, and he trusted his pilots, the air defense guys, and all those. And one can think that if there were 42 pilots that participated from Pakistan, there were at least 42 more individuals who were completely integrated into directly into the operations. So that's the sense. So integrating these individuals and their machines at the right moment was challenging, but it happened because it had been meticulously rehearsed. And then the commanders went on to execute it meticulously. And the air chief also built the command architecture to support it, but led it personally. I was speaking elsewhere and I said, the chief that never went home during this war, and that's actually a fact. So the headline result, we know about it, the force of 42 aircraft defeating a formation of 72, including very advanced 4Gen platform. This wasn't an accident. This was a product of networks over numbers and software over steel. That is a lesson that Pakistan must institutionalize now. And it happened, it worked. So that is why we should now talk about the second aspect of where should we go. Institutionalizing past success is not enough. The battle space is not static, it is now accelerating. So if let me just cherry pick 4 points on where the future air power, air warfare trends are going post May 2025. A clear idea that shift to non-contact warfare. Uh, Rules of engagement used to ensure that the wreckage falls after a violation onto your own territory. Now it doesn't that, it's not even a requirement. It high intensity, short duration, complex precision strikes. The primacy of air power is very, very clear. And air power is now larger, a lot major chunk done by the Air Force, but also through the land missiles, and that's why we hear about the rocket force, we hear about jointness, and a more powerful, higher defense organization. So all that happens. The third is the drone and the counter drone revolution. The unmanned systems, the swarms will be central to the future planning, and this will drive an intense competition in both the offensive and drones, but also the electronic warfare and counter drone to jam, blind, or destroy. And the fourth factor is the obvious one, networked and multi-domain operations. So not only that, all the seamless integration of satellites, sensors, electronic warfare, strike platform, single rapid sensor to shooter cycle, the kill chain, and the ability to do the OODA, observe, orientate, decide, and act much faster than the opponent will be the key to any next victory. So we obviously know that the next war is going to be different than this one, and that's why we need to go look at what the future is likely to be. And I'm going to talk about Pakistan and India, but that's a larger lesson that has been learned globally as well. The future of the air power will be shaped by three irreversible trends: the drone revolution, the AI-enabled kill chain, and the fifth gen imperative. Just a couple of things on each of them. On the drones, um, May 2025 actually imposed a psychological reality on both sides. Now, neither was willing to risk its best pilots and most expensive aircraft in deep penetration missions over heavily defended airspace. Um, if it has to happen, it will happen in exclusive situations, and that's different. But standoff weapons actually now, and better standoff weapons are actually making it happen, and easily possible. Um, the reluctance is understandable and rational. It points directly towards the unmanned combat system as the dominant platform of the next war. So waves of attritable UCAVs, the unmanned combat ready vehicles, can suppress air defenses, conduct ISR, and absorb the first volley of the enemy's missile salvos while keeping the humans and more expensive manned aircraft at a standoff distance. So this is something that will happen. Now, what Pakistan's existing drone portfolio is a foundation, and the work is already ahead to go into more indigenous AI piloted systems that demand brilliant minds, computational power, um, and not huge assembly lines, but more of those things. Um, Pakistan and Air Force has actually led that to set up this aerospace technology park where a lot of indigenous work will happen and continues to happen and be develop this. Because the man-unmanned team is a bridge between today and the modern and what lies in the future. So Pakistan, China, Turkey are developing these architectures. Um, so when you have a fast jet like J-10C or a JF-17 Block 3, and then also have a loyal wingman swarm, so AI-enabled these things this is going to be really transformational effect. Now, fifth generation, we keep hearing about Pakistan being on the threshold of indulging the J-35 stealth fighter with pilot training already being reported. This is all strategically significant. But stealth in 2025 is not primarily about radar cross-section. It is about integration. There are stealth coatings that are used, there are compressed data links, there are adversarial simulations. All of these things happen the same way. And a digital ecosystem actually that makes a aircraft network node appear rather than a solitary shooter. That said, we must recall the recent the press conference that we had, and the PF senior officer who spoke during this press conference, along with the DG ISPR. And there he signaled something, and I'm purposely paraphrasing it, that when the need arises, the right weapon systems and the associated weapons and networks will already be available. So it's actually there's a way to evade the possibility of complacency. How long would it take to be there? And is signaling that when the need arises, so that gives you a sense that when this war ended, and of course there's been a commemoration after 1 year, everything, but the military, in particular the Air Force, was already thinking ahead of the next war is going to do different, and how and what do we do now. So all that is going on. So, and the underpinning of all this must be a sovereign C4I SR structure. Our data links are also a strategic asset. Um, The next step it will be injecting AI through the kill chain by accelerating the OODA loop, not only in the speed but also the hyper OODA loop, augmentation through threat classifications and enabling human-machine teams at the command level. That kind of closes the decision cycle faster, much faster, and this is happening in the future. But that's not a prediction that I'm making. This is already part of the PF doctrine. Now, this issue, but one must not let this to say May 2025 was a validation, yes, but whether now is the question. Uh, there's a recent document, March 2026, Indian Defense Forces Vision 2047, a roadmap for future-ready Indian military. And what does it talk about? Among several things, integrated multi-domain force, AI, space, cyber, drones, Viksit Bharat, developed India capable of handling future warfare. So this time, May 2025, the Indians did get surprises, but if we were to sit happy and complacent, they are in all probability working already in that direction. They are in an accelerated correction cycle. They're aiming at multi-domain operation. That's what the doctrine says. It would expand its Meteor inventory perhaps across the other fighter fleet. It will try closing the AWACS gap that Pakistan clearly exploited. It would try for an AI curated layered air defense architecture. The adversity that Pakistan faces in the next crisis will not be constrained by the same kind of rules of engagement. So they will also be looking at things differently. Um, and they will also not assume what kind of missile ranges we have. This time they did go wrong, as we know. So, but before I come to more specifics, let me just say what has the world learned? The world learned several things simultaneously. The first thing the world learned was the Chinese defense technology. For example, the JTNC and the PL-15 became a fine combo. The stocks of the Chengdu Corporation have gone up after the first engagement. JTNC orders have been placed by some countries and are being considered by others. And Lasu, that makes Rafael and Mirages, the shares fell by 9%. So the global market has been reading this correctly. So it also demonstrated that numerical superiority that was kind of India's consistent advantage, perhaps in the conventional domain, can be neutralized by qualitative superiority in training, doctrine, integration, and specific force multiplier domains. So that has actually been very helpful. And that also demonstrated that Pakistan conventional deterrence were very real. So we've actually managed the nuclear threshold in a more positive way, which has been a great thing. And I was speaking elsewhere and I referred to the diplomat, which said the Indians were taught a lesson in humanity. But what are the enduring lessons for us? uh, that our investment in platform modernization, in training rigor, and force multiplier development, indigenous precision strikes are the right investments. Are they enough or not is another question. What the Air Force did at that time was that while the process of getting the national level budgets is intricate, it also tightened its belt and got into some programs anyway. That happened. So everything costs money, and fortunately, the newer emerging technologies are not as horribly expensive than the traditional, uh, the ships and the fast jets and the missiles. Um, and we recall that the Indian Chief of Defense Staff also initially acknowledged initial losses, and he said, "So the tactics are being rectified," and they acknowledge. So this new vision is actually response or direct response to this kind of humiliation they got. So we cannot afford complacency. What we take from this anniversary, 1 year, is confidence, but not arrogance. That's the same thing. And I don't think we are that. And if we were to recall how this chief of air staff spoke, he spoke with that confidence. He spoke of what was achieved, and he also signaled his conviction that years of hard work has paid off, and that by itself is a signal that post and during this 1 year, significant things have happened. I may know of some which I'm not at liberty to talk about in specific details, but Pakistan Air Force, Pakistan Army, and the overall unified command structure is operating that way. So I think I want to just close with these ideas that the next thing will have a lot of emerging technologies and the integration of it. The next one will need whole of the nation approach. We already have more synergy in the military better than ever before. This will need to be sustained better, but also going in the direction of what all we want to do. So resolve, integration, and doctrinal sophistication can happen, but our task is to continue to prepare for what comes thereafter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Khalid. It's always a pleasure listening to you and your insights. Thank you for talking to us about what Pakistan did right in the air domain and how can some of these lessons be institutionalized, and what is the future outlook. And we should continue this discussion after the webinar as well. With this, we will, so I do recognize Ambassador Aizaz Chaudhry, you have raised hand, but I'll give you the floor once a question is posed to you when we moderate the session. So if you could just hold on to your thoughts. With this, we would like to, move to our last but not the least panelist, Syed Zia Jaffrey, our very own brilliant young scholar. And Ali, I would want, because I have some coercive leverage over you, I would want if you could be concise and short, in your remarks. We have a lot of younger audience here. So I want you to speak to them because you write so much, and we're very proud of all your writings and insights. How should the next generation of Pakistani scholars, think about deterrence dynamics in our region and beyond? What new research agenda do you think emerges from May 2025 conflict, especially on, narrative warfare, air power, emerging tech, escalation control, Pakistan's diplomatic repositioning? You have heard all the brilliant speakers. So just a word to the younger generation that if they want to do research on strategic issues in Pakistan or foreign policy, repositioning, how should they be thinking about these research questions? So over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rabia, for the invite and for the introduction. I think everybody on this group has physically seen you exercising that coercive leverage over me. I'll try to keep my comments to about 7 minutes. So I think you've raised a number of very important questions, because I think practice and practitioners, drive research. So we have seen the event. We have seen practitioners doing their jobs rightly. So that leaves no excuse for us to not do any kind of new research. So one of the things that I want to delve into is the myths that were broken, and I think we could center our research around that. First of all, the idea that was propounded by people in the West and by obviously Indians was that Pakistan lacked its agency. So one of the most important things that this crisis, and even the previous one to a certain extent, broke, was the fact that Pakistan exercised its agency in a very befitting and effective manner. So the question that can be birthed from this point that I've made is this: how could middle powers, exercise agency amid coercion from bigger and more larger powers. So that's a very important, in my opinion, a very important thing that we should focus on. Two, in my opinion, I think deterrence. I'm happy that people are now increasingly and confidently talking about the importance of conventional deterrence. I have been arguing for a long, long time that nuclear weapons are not the be all and the end all of deterrence. Deterrence is a very dynamic concept. So, conventional deterrence, in my opinion, is central in an environment where the three levels of war, sub-conventional, conventional, and nuclear, feed into each other, and the jump happens quickly. And with the advent of emerging and disruptive technologies, this window is shrinking, and the jump will be much quicker. So therefore, conventional deterrence, we need to conduct more research on conventional deterrence, because in 2019 and 2025, Pakistan was able to respond conventionally. And by doing so, Pakistan not only uh, signaled the world that its nuclear threshold is not as low as people thought it was, and also that we can restore the balance, so to speak, by even not mentioning the N word. So we were dubbed as a country which would immediately talk about and then probably use nuclear weapons. But these two crises have demonstrated, um, in no uncertain way, that Pakistan has the confidence and the capability to show resolve and restraint through conventional forces alone. So I think there's a lot of scope for us to work the on theorizing restraint and on establishing a linkage or researching the prospect of establishing a linkage between conventional weaponry and resolve creation. So I think this is very important. The other important thing that I want to delve into is, since you talked about coercive leverage in a very different context, I think uh, the understanding of there is still a lack of understanding of what coercion is. So therefore, I believe that deterrence, which is one side of coercion, has to be seen as one of the coercive tactics. There's a lot of work, we focus a lot on deterrence, but unfortunately, uh, our behemoth eastern neighbor is not trying to deter Pakistan, it is trying to compel Pakistan. So it is trying to exercise compellence. And there's a dearth of research on compellence and how stronger powers resort to compellence and how they fail, because the literature on coercion, specifically on its compellence strand, is very clear about the fact that greater firepower does not portend conventional coercive success. So I think in the South Asian context, we need to uh, reimagine coercion and how where deterrence permeates compellence and vice versa. Another important thing, because I just recently wrote on it, is, Dr. Adil has been, and you also and others have long argued that the Cold War is over, and so are the concepts. I mean, we could learn from those concepts, but we can't copy paste those concepts. And we can talk about counter value strikes, counter force strikes, and all that. So the concept that I am pretty concerned about, and that I think needs reimagining, is that of brinkmanship. Now, brinkmanship, when it was introduced by Thomas Schelling in 1960 and 66 in his two classic books, uh, was a period which was seeing the height of the Cold War. In that context, brinkmanship was possible. We could we could start the process whereby both or either side could lose control, and then that loss of control or the prospect of that loss of control could deter one of the parties and they could show restraint. In South Asia, I believe, and researchers should delve into this more extensively, the very start of a crisis, given the geographic contiguity and lack of dialogue between India and Pakistan, the very start of the crisis is in and of itself an act of brinkmanship. And with the proliferation of emerging and disruptive technologies, I believe that this idea of trying to convince the other side to back down or stand down by proving yourself to be the actor that is losing control or could lose control or rock the boat, as Schelling called, is quite problematic. So I think South Asian scholars must try to reimagine the concept of brinkmanship in the South Asian context. The other important thing that I want to focus on, and we have written about this as well, is Dr. Maria Sultan rightly alluded to that too, is how Western technologies and Chinese technologies will interact and shape the future dynamics of war and conflict as a whole. So I think we need to understand two things: how defense relationships could reshape security and conflictual dynamics. I think this is a very broad question that can be further broken down. Also, how can these technologies be integrated into strategies? Because there's an inexorable connection between technology and strategy. Technology in and of itself cannot do anything if it is not made part of a thorough strategic mosaic, which can facilitate one's force employment towards operational and strategic objectives. And we recently had a podcast with Dr. Kelly Gracio, and she talked about the very fact that Iran has not only mastered technology, but has also mastered the art of employing that technology for operational effects. So we saw in Air Commodore Banuri also talked about it. Pakistan also showed that it has learned over the years the art of integrating technology with its strategic as part of its strategy. So I think more academic, and I'm stressing the word more academic research is needed on the indigenous patterns of establishing a connection between technology and strategy. And I'm very happy that now we have, if somebody wants to apply the case study or the structured focused comparisons, now we have case studies from Pakistan. We don't necessarily need to look back at the Cuban Missile Crisis or the Able Archer exercise. We have crises that have happened in Pakistan and that have shaped all of us, even if some of us were outside there, but it has shaped us and our strategic thoughts on strategy and thoughts on tactics even. Also, last but not least, I would also look at the interaction of tactics and strategies. So the tactical level, the operational level, and the strategic levels, their interaction is quite well known and observable. But in the South Asian context, I see little academic research on theorizing those interactions. I think I have hit the 7-minute mark and I'll stop here.
Brilliant as always, Ali. You were in your 12th minute, but who's counting? So thank you so much for your intervention. And I hope the younger crowd here has taken notes, and so have all of us, because, we all are in this collective together, advancing the research agenda in our own capacities. So with this, I would now move to the Q&A session and hand it over to my colleague, Abdul Waris Hamid, who's a research associate at CSSPR. Waris, you have a very, very difficult task at your hand, and I am very confident that you will manage it. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Abia, and thank you to all the panelists for joining us at today's CSSPR webinar commemorating May 2025 win for Pakistan. So I would like to thank all the attendees for their brilliant questions in the Q&A tab. We have received a lot of questions, but in the best interest of time, I'll restrict just to 3 questions. The top 3 we have picked. And I'm grateful to Dr. Adil for answering a lot of questions posed to him in the Q&A tab. Thank you, Dr. Adil, for making it easy for us. And I would request Ali that there's a question that is posed to him just now in the Q&A tab. If he can just take a moment and answer that, there would be a great help. I'll come to 3 questions. So the first question is addressed to Ambassador Aizaz. Sir, I'll read out the 3 questions together, and then all the speakers, the 3 speakers who the questions are addressed to, can talk about them. So, Ambassador Aizaz, the question posed to you is: how has media narratives and information warfare shaped Pakistan's strategic diplomacy and foreign policy approach in post-May 2025 regional political environment, particularly in relation to regional stability and international perception? The second question is for Dr. Salma Malik, and that is how Pakistan can maintain credibility as a mediator in the international conflicts while still dealing with its own regional security challenges. And
Could you also tell us who are the attendees, their names as well, so that we recognize?
Yes. So the first question posed to Ambassador Aizaz was from SN Bilal. The question posed to Dr. Salma Malik is from Khansa Tufail Anjum. It was not posed to Dr. Salma Malik directly, but as a generic question, but I would like to pose it to Dr. Salma. And the third question is from Dr. Maria Sultan. It was posed by Javed Laghari. And if you would like to comment on the nuclear CBMs and nuclear safety and security and risk reduction forums to prevent accidental or panic-driven nuclear incidents between India and Pakistan. Over to you, Ambassador Aizaz.
All right, thank you. I had myself also raised the flag thinking that Khalid Banuri was the last speaker, so my apologies. I didn't know, but I'm glad that I heard Ali Zia Jaffrey, that because he touched something that I wanted to flag, essentially. He said that we need to reimagine the brinkmanship in the South Asian context. Given the enormous challenge of very short reaction time that both have. So these emerging technologies are going to make it very difficult for both countries to maintain strategic stability. And Adil Sultan has rightly explained that the conventional space is expanding below the nuclear threshold to an alarming level. And Indians seem to think that it is still possible for them to continue to expand further. That means that scope and space for conflict and outbreak of conflict is still there, which is very, very dangerous. And I think I wanted to actually alert everyone, especially you, Dr. Rabia Akhtar, because we all get in touch with our Indian counterparts in working in different domains. They got to be, more cognizant of the direction that this whole conflict is taking. And I don't see them, even some thought leaders within India, I don't see them urging for the kind of diplomacy that is now required between the two, so that this threat comes down. So that was sort of my comment for which I raised my flag. Now, to Hassan Bilal's question, whether media and information warfare, to what extent it has shaped the outcome, I don't think really it is media and information warfare that has shaped the nature of the conflict. I think, as perhaps Maria said, that there are events and then they keep happening at a pace much faster than any one of us can really control. And therefore, the space for diplomacy is needed much more than ever. because increasingly the social media and information explosion has undermined the credibility of information as well. People now are becoming increasingly more skeptical on what is being said on the TV screens and on the social media. And we have seen that during the period from 6 May to 9 May, what Indian media was blurting out. Clearly, I think information warfare has gone up to a point. Now, for 2 decades, more than 2 decades, India had created a perception through information and through disinformation about Pakistan, and just one event happens and all their hard work has gone to nil. So my sense is that we should be really focusing on what is truth, what is right, and that's why I'm glad it is named Marka-e-Haq, because it is battle for truth that will eventually prevail, and it is battle for peace that will actually determine the shape of the future. Disinformation will carry you only up to a point. And leadership matters, truth matters, and standing for the right causes matters. That is what Pakistan has. I'm glad, well done, and I think that's where we should be headed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aizaz. Over to you, Dr. Salma.
Thank you very much, Faris. Most grateful. And first of all, apologies, Dr. Rabia and the panel, for taking so much time in presenting. I actually thought I had just spoken for 5 minutes. Yeah, so that's a dangerous tendency. Escalation control is very important. Okay, so about you cannot actually bargain one power tool for another, or you can't wait for these things to get better and then you get into a mediation effort and you're looking at it from a position of strength. I get the point that you're saying that when we look at diplomacy, when we talk about third-party mediation, that is a very powerful power projection tool. Agreed. Yet we have certain vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. Absolutely. But these things go hand in hand. As nearly 2 decades back, the Chinese, they came to Pakistan and they gave Pakistan this aspect that you need to put certain contentious issues, even the core problems that you have with India, on a back burner, position yourself, strengthen yourself economically, financially, and then there would be no looking back. Everyone would kind of gravitate towards you. That was a very sound advice. But the thing is, that certain countries can afford doing what they can. China, by its mere size, power potential, had the capacity to do what it could. Pakistan, with this ongoing struggle with India's animosity, how to handle it, has to do daily firefightings. So, hence, our economics, our terrorism issues, which are both interrelated, what is happening in the region around us, especially in Afghanistan, as part of a proxy warfare that India has floated against us. They're using Afghanistan's turf very ably, very capably against us. They have deep pockets. They are investing into secessionist movements, igniting secessionist movements in Pakistan, and doing n number of activities wherever they find that they can exploit that situation. But that cannot ever make any country just get itself in a box and open that box when the world is perfect. There's never a perfect world. You have to make space for yourself. And the Marka-e-Haq provided us with that necessary strategic break, strategic space, and strategic leverage that we have very ably, very humbly, not bragging, but very humbly utilized and made the most of it. And the steadfastness that we have shown, both in our nuclear potential as well as during this war and in our conventional potential, is going to help us also overcome these vulnerabilities. And henceforth, mediation and all, that is also an acknowledgement of how well Pakistan is doing. And this is not Pakistan bragging, but the world talking for Pakistan. We have not done this talk for ourselves. People are asking us. And if Pakistan did offer a mediation offer to Iran and Israel, Iran and USA, they could have very easily turned it down, but they did not, because they knew that Pakistan has that acumen and that potential that they can do the work. So these things have to go hand in hand. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salma. Over to you, Dr. Mariam.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question, Mr. Lagari. It's something which has crippled the mind of anybody who has worked on deterrence in South Asia and confidence building measures. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the South Asian Cuba, the 13 days for South Asia have not arrived. We do not have had our Cuban Missile Crisis yet. So we are looking at states which have not stabilized the strategic stability. Unfortunately, we are at higher rungs of instability, and at higher rungs of instability, stability is acquired at a higher price. And unfortunately, it is being acquired during war and through the war mechanics. So that is the reality. So unless and until our Indian friends actually recognize the fact that Pakistan is not only nuclear, but also capable to readdress any challenge at any level, the recognition of the threat will remain elusive. Because what we have looked at is that, when you look at the BrahMos channel challenge, which we had, where they actually had a nuclear-tipped missile capable, nuclear-tipped capable missile actually come into Pakistani territory, and later on they came up with a whole sense of understanding that it was false flag or whatever. But the reality of the matter is this, that they have no understanding that in situations where the threat is alive, where the animosity is real, future will not be so forgiving. The last time Pakistan didn't say anything, but it doesn't mean that as Pakistan builds up its EW capacity and other things, it would not lead to a nuclear standoff in a very different manner, or a military conflict, which can very quickly escalate. What we have also seen is from Balakot and from others is just that there is an underlying salient nuclear deterrence at work. But at this moment, unfortunately, nuclear risk reductions and all of these things require a certain level of sober reality, which needs to come down, at least in our counterparts in New Delhi. Islamabad understands this very well. So we have tried to be very responsible in terms of always maintaining the balance of operations. That means that we have not tried to come up with even military hits, which could solicit, a strong counter reaction from the other side. But what we have seen is that this is not seen as Pakistan deliberately acting with responsibility, but rather seen with a lot of, cynicism. Because even when Pakistan, like, for example, even on 6th and 7th of May, Pakistan could have hit really bad and really hard and maybe taken much more aircrafts than what we did. It wouldn't have been 8-0, it could have been 18-0 very easily. But that was not met with any sanguine reality from the other side. We saw another wave of drones, then we saw some ships, then we saw an aircraft carrier, then we saw, like you name it, the whole 9 yards. Now, it's another thing that it is the worst story for any country which plans an assault and plans an offensive and lands up with 8-0. Because that basically shows that you're not even capable of manifesting even one strike. It's not something small. It basically shows that there is a strong salient stability which Pakistan has. There is a strong counteraction. It's not going to be deterrence by denial. It may be deterrence by punishment, which will become very real for the future. So nuclear risk reductions, great idea, but not applicable to South Asia. Both sides have not arrived. We will need another couple of scares before the reality of the nuclear deterrence becomes apparent to our colleagues in New Delhi. They have still not transformed from Bollywood to the actual battlefield. And because even afterwards, they're still talking about, they sent their people everywhere in the world thinking that, whatever version of the truth they will give, the world will understand. They forgot that the India-Pakistan battlefield was visible to everybody. Everyone saw it. And before anybody from Pakistan even wrote about it, it was the New York Times and the Washington Post, which actually talked about the biggest air battle. it talked about the biggest air battle and documented it. That just shows that nuclear stability may be seen far more strongly by others than the people sitting in Delhi. So when will they arrive at that? We're not so sure. So we are going to see military adventurism, unfortunately, till this reality actually becomes far more clear to them. So nuclear risk reductions won't be possible. Nuclear CBMs, they will be effective, but not the blinding reality of the future, because what we are looking at is an age where nuclear wars will be fought, because war fighting has now suddenly become the name of the game. Unfortunately, certain taboos were also questioned in the current US-Iran disposition of the war, and that is like hitting of nuclear facilities by conventional arms, something which we would have earlier thought was not possible, despite the fact that the International Atomic Energy Agency said that Isfahan should not be hit, despite the fact that there was, numerous international experts which said Iranian nuclear facilities should not be targeted, but we saw the precedents being set. So that said, the war in Ukraine, the war in Iran, puts the nuclear reality of South Asia in a different way. At the moment, it's not been done, but future is future. Until we have an actual stability and actual CBMs which can transcend the DGMO level to something stronger, it's not going to happen. So sorry for being the bearer of bad news.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria. Ambassador Saab, do you want to say a few words before I close? Please go ahead.
I just want to flag a thought that came up in an article by Elizabeth Threlkeld of Stimson Center that she wrote for Foreign Affairs, where she contends that the next conflict between Pakistan and India will be much more intense, and that the United States will not be in a position to influence a ceasefire or to calm it down. I will be speaking at the Stimson on Tuesday and give my own comments on that article, but I thought I should leave this as a thought because there's no time left. We need to think about whether this argument makes sense or not. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Aizaz. This is really hard to sum up, so I'm not even going to try. But I do agree with Dr. Maria that there is pretty bad news out there. But, I've always believed that that shouldn't stop us from talking responsibly and talking about creating space for nuclear risk reduction, as we move forward. And to something that Ambassadors, as you said, that our Indian colleagues who write about these issues are not really forthcoming. And you're very right, the recent commentary in the past year that has come out, hell-bent on proving that Pakistan's nuclear bluff was called was like absolutely unhinged, And like I said, this pushes us to continue the conversation positively with restraint that we have showed on battlefield. We also need that responsibility and restraint in our thought processes as well, and perhaps be the bearers of good news in the region, at least coming from our side. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, all my fellow panelists, colleagues, students who have joined us. So as we conclude today's session, one message stands out clearly, that May 2025 was not merely a crisis that Pakistan managed, and as all panelists have said, it was a moment that tested Pakistan's strategic maturity, deterrence credibility, and diplomatic potential. And the challenge ahead is to ensure that the gains of this deterrence are translated into sustained diplomacy, Pakistan's regional relevance, and responsible leadership in an increasingly uncertain world. And history gives nations defining moments. Wisdom lies in recognizing them and building on them from here onwards. So thank you very much to all our distinguished panelists and audience for being a part of this important conversation. The dialogue does not end here. It merely begins. Thank you so much, everybody. Over and out.
Thank you very much. Very kind.
Thank you.